All right, we're going to go ahead and start and just allow people to trickle in as we go. So thank you so much for joining us today. Just a few points before we kick this off. Please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. You're welcome to use the chat box to ask any questions or make comments, but please make sure that all dialogue is civil and respectful. My name is Jasmine Coley, and I'm an AmeriCorps member serving as the Service Coordinator for Equity and Inclusion. This webinar today is hosted by our office, along with the Office for Equity and Inclusion in Student Life. All of the co-organizers will each have an opportunity to introduce themselves throughout the webinar today. The mission of the Office of Community Engaged Learning is to develop and encourage change makers who know themselves, understand the complexities of the world that they live in, and take creative actions to solve problems. Racial injustice and systematic racism are extremely complex, but we have the ability and the tools to take creative action to solve problems. In the wake of the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the shooting of Jacob Black, and so many others, you may be asking yourself, how can I help? How can I get involved? The issue of racial injustice are systematic, and it takes a number of strategies to address these many issues. But there is a place for all of us at that table. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the next slide. In today's webinar, we'll briefly discuss the pathways for social and civic change, civic and social change, have the opportunity to hear from current students and alumni and community members about their efforts and initiatives, and learn tips for being a better ally in general. In this model, there are 6 primary strategies to create change. And we all need these strategies, but each person does not have to be involved in all 6, but it takes all 6. It's about finding your interests and your skills and your experiences and where they lie and where you can put those interests and skills. The pathways are community engaged learning and research, direct service, policy and governance, community organizing and activism, philanthropy, and social entrepreneurship and corporate social responsibility. Drake students have the opportunity to take a pathways assessment and to help you think more about your path or what paths are best for you. I'll go ahead and put that link for that assessment in the chat box in a few seconds. But you can also set up a one-on-one advising appointment with some of the community engagement peers that work out of my office in order to create a plan and a guide on how you can use that information from the pathways assessment to implement change. Now we have the opportunity to hear from some of our current students, alumni, and community members on how they are being active in the community and addressing some of the racial injustice that we are seeing today. I'm going to go ahead and drop the slide, stop sharing. I'm going to allow the Supply Hive, the Food for Our Fighters, and the Brown Book Box to go ahead and introduce themselves and some of their background.
Well, I guess I'll start. My name is Zakaria Hill. I am the executive director, co-founder of the Supply Hive, along with Aaliyah Quinn. She couldn't make it today because of school. However, yes, we are a new nonprofit. We have our nonprofit 501c3 status. Just got that in August for good, so we're nationally recognized. But we started back in June on like the 5th day of protests. And yeah, didn't think it was going to be a nonprofit, but me and Aaliyah just wanted to do more. So we came together to provide meals, first aid, water, snacks for protesters. And then along the line, we started doing our own events. We started with a BLM tattoo day at Lucky Gal in Ankeny, and then we transitioned in July to a Black motherhood event where we put the spotlight on Black mothers, but we served all families in the Des Moines area and gave out a bunch of baby and mother supplies and had resources there to help families with whatever they needed. Then we went into a clothing drive, a yard sale, and then a back to school event back in August. And just last week, we had a Beyonce fundraiser. And we have a upcycled fashion show coming up the end of um, September. But pretty much, we're really all about promoting physical, mental, and spiritual health, as well as sustainability. We have a community garden that we've been working hard on. It's over in the 50314 area code, connected to Edna Griffin Park. And so uh, that's kind of the start to that. We really want to keep this movement going, and keep everybody self sustainable. Ourselves included. It's been hard to balance school and not, like, we were expecting this, but we're glad that we're here. I know I'm glad that I'm doing the work that needs to be done, and just promoting all over community and mutual aid.
Do we want the brown book box to introduce themselves and their work? Give them a minute. How about the food for our fighters while we allow the brown book box to join?
Hi, my name is Denise Lopez. I'm a senior here at Drake. I grew up here in the Des Moines area, and
No, you're good.
okay. So I started Food for Our Fighters back at the very beginning of June. Um, During that first weekend of protest, that was the very, very end of May, I would be out marching, and I would be out the entire day. And I'd finally get home at night and be like, oh my goodness, I did not eat today. I didn't even get myself anything to drink today. And I noticed that that must be the case for a lot of people. There was one occasion where before I went out with a few friends, I actually stopped at the grocery store and picked up a bunch of waters, and we ended up going over by the Merle Hay area that one night where it got really bad. Um, and we ended up just passing all of those out. So later on, I went home and I was like, why don't I just do that? Like, there's different ways to help throughout this movement. It doesn't just have to be marching. It doesn't just have to be chanting. It doesn't just have to be sharing social media posts. Like, you can actually do something for the people who are working on making things better here. So I made a social media post, got a bunch of friends together to get some shopping done so we could get to my house and put meal packs together for people out in the streets. And we would go out with like the three little coolers that we had, use the same cardboard boxes that the food came in to transport everything out and make sure that our community was nourished, that they were hydrated so that they could keep doing this work. And over time, we ended up having a lot of people help out in a lot of different ways, not just in going to the store, not just in prepping and getting things out, but there were people who were sharing the work that we were doing. There were people who donated a lot to what we were doing just to make sure that we could keep this going. And what we've done with that in turn is actually redistribute a lot of those funds, and making sure that the organizers can sustain themselves and making sure that other causes, the most recent one that we learned about was the Meskwaki elders who needed food through the winter. So we've distributed funds to that cause. And we just want to keep an eye out and make sure that all aspects, as many as we can, as many that we're aware of, are receiving help that, if we're able to give it, we can give it to them.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, this is a new platform. I have not used Blackboard, so I'm a little new to this. Sorry that I was muted. But my name is Brittni Cavill, and I am a proud alum of Drake University, and I am a co-founder of the Brown Book Box, who I started with Dariana Donegan, who also attended Drake with me. And so the purpose of the Brown Book Box, we did not get started right away, or we did not get started because of a specific instance, but in our experience at Drake University, we were very active in involved in organizing around campus, around issues of equity. And once we graduated and went on to real life, it was just like, okay, well, what now? Like, what do we do to really have an impact that is not simply marching or organizing protests, because we're parents, we have full-time jobs, and we just don't have that time or that flexibility to do that. And so something that we noticed with our kids was that it was very hard for us to find children's books that show diverse characters. And so for a while, we just played around with, well, what if we started a subscription service and provided these children's books to families, and we do all the research on the back end. And then that progressed to us developing activities and starting to craft. And so as of right now, the Brown Book Box is a subscription service. We provide reading materials and activities to families for children between the ages of 0 and 9. We've been around for a year and a half now. And we have always been very committed to staying in the community and staying community driven. And so we are actually located in Austin, Texas, but from day one, our very first month of business, we were participating in community workshops. We have hosted various fundraisers over this year and a half to raise money to provide our books and activities free of cost to low-income families and to schools. I've given back to my hometown of Cairo, Illinois, which is a very, very small town. We've worked with parent educators, with school districts to help with their family nights and provide for them. We donated books to a teacher in Detroit, Michigan. And we are currently working on developing a relationship with a nonprofit in Austin so that we can continue to serve the audience that we're intended to serve.
Thank you so much for that. I'm hearing a lot of, this work doesn't always have to look one way, and all of you are doing very great work in different ways. What I'm interested in is what inspires you to keep going with this? What inspired you to get involved with what you're doing right now in the first place? So that's a two-part question, but I know some of you have already answered that a little bit, so I'm just giving you an option. So whoever is ready to answer that question, feel free to just chime in.
I can go first. So pretty much, I've been active in the protest since day one. And it was about day 5 that I woke up and I'm like, I'm sick of just waking up, going out with my cardboard sign when I know I have the health, I have the passion, I have the materials to organize more and to do more. And so from there, that's when I called up Aaliyah. I'm like, hey, I have an idea. And then that's just transpired into where we are now. Um, and yeah, a bit about myself. I guess I didn't give it before, but I'm a 5th year at Iowa State. I was studying software engineering up until last year. Then I switched to management information systems. So I'm very techie. I have a tech background. Um, and not really nonprofit at all. I didn't see myself being here, but I see myself helping people in some capacity. Um, and it just so happens that this is my capacity.
Anybody else?
For me, I think that I've alluded to this, but it was my kids and wanting to make sure that I provided them with the knowledge that I have, or a pathway to the knowledge that I have about who I am, where I come from, and allowing them to have the opportunity to see positive images of themselves. I did not, living in Austin, Texas, there's not a lot of African Americans in the city. And so it was just, reading has always been important to me. And there's all types of research that shows prisons actually they use the third grade reading level to base how many prison beds they're going to need in the future. And so I really wanted to find a way, an impact that's going to, one, teach my kids new information and allow them to explore who they are, what they stand for, and see positive images. But I also wanted to participate in a cause or start something that will truly have an impact on the trajectory of our young people's lives. And so it was just a passion of literacy and really wanting to bring that like cultural experience to the reading process for my kids, and then wanting to replicate that with other families.
Food for our fighters.
Yeah, for me, my motivation was very similar to Zakaria's, where I felt like I can do more. Like there's so much more that could happen here. And what's really kept me like going is that this movement didn't, it's not just about outrage, it's not just about being angry about what's happening, but it's about wanting to bring our community together and show that we have love for each other. And one way that I've always known that is through food. That's always been a big thing. But in doing that, we also like want to be very inclusive of all types of like different people. So like we'll have the idea to make something, but we want to be like, well, wait, what if somebody doesn't eat meat? What if somebody doesn't like this or like that? So we want to make sure that we have options for all types of different people so everyone can be involved in one way or another.
For that, our next question is going to be, what is the most challenging part about being involved in doing the work that you're doing today?
I'll go first again. But so for me, it's finding that balance of work and self care, and now school, since now I'm back in school. And so time management has always been one of my biggest struggles, but now it's um, very much on the forefront, and I can see it now more than ever. However, I've learned to prioritize. It's hard to prioritize when you're talking about community, and some of the other things just seem so sublime. Like me getting it, like reading a couple chapters or something, when I could be out on the streets fighting for human lives, you know. But it is taking that step back and looking at the bigger picture. Um, and then also another challenge is just navigating the nonprofit world now. Uh, when I have no experience, I get a lot of imposter syndrome because I'm like, who am I to make a board and run a board and do all this stuff that I have never sought out to do before. I've never even really been an active volunteer in any other nonprofits. And so me wanting people to volunteer for mine and uh, getting that back, like it's, yeah, I've been dealing with imposter syndrome, but I get myself back into reality and I remind myself of the work that we're doing and like what's going to happen. We've seen what, like all the smiles and the help that we've put out there in just 3 months. So with a lot more time at our hands, a lot more can happen. So uh, those reality checks definitely come in hand. Come in handy.
I would say the most most challenging moment would be access to capital. And so I was a business major, and I too had to learn how to find a balance. And so I'm a mom, I'm in school, I work full time, and I have my business. And for the first year, we were doing very well at having a balance. But at this time, we our business tripled in June. In the month of June, our business tripled. And so with that comes more responsibilities on the business side. And we have seen and faced hurdles when it comes to receiving the access to capital that we need to run a business and to level up in the amount of productivity that we have. And that has been our biggest struggle currently, trying to figure out how to navigate this financial world in a process that is not set up for us. And so we've faced hurdles, even receiving a secured business credit card for something as small as $500, which will blow your mind because I received my first credit card when I was a freshman at Drake and I had no job for $500. But here I am, two women, full-time jobs. We make a decent living, and our business can't get $500. And so facing those realities has been tough. And then I would say the next struggle that we're having is that our business is growing, but it's very important that we stay true to the audience that we intended to serve. And so it's been important for us to figure out a plan of how to still serve families that look like us and come from backgrounds like us while our business scales. And so those have been two struggles for us because we want to stay true to who we are. We want to continue to serve kids that look like us, families that look like us. And we also want our business to grow and scale, but we've just faced hurdles, probably because of who we are and our identity and navigating those worlds. But it's been a struggle, but we are actively trying to figure out how do we put these pieces together.
For me, a lot of my struggle was, of course, with balancing everything because it'd be like I would stay up all night trying to plan what we're gonna do for the next day, and then I'd have to go to work and work an 8-hour shift, and then still have to make sure that we got everything that we needed beforehand. So it was a lot of wanting to make sure that I had the people there to help me. And then as the months went on, as you guys may have seen, like the numbers went down significantly with participation in all sorts of events as well. So that kind of like messed with the way that we were planning things, because it wasn't just participating in the events that were planned by organizers, but also like with the people who were able to help out with what we were doing. Because we're working with people who are students. About half of them go to Drake, and um, another part of them went to Iowa State, and we have people who have jobs, of course. And so it was just really hard to plan around all of that. Another part of that was like we didn't have like a decent line of communication up until recently, where we would just find out about things and be like, okay, we're gonna go. But now we're like in the know about it ahead of time. Like we'll know about a week in advance, like this is what's gonna happen, this is what we're hoping will come out of this, and we'll be like, okay, this is how we can plan based off of this information. Um, but yeah, it's been tricky just trying to figure all this out because I have never done anything like this before. But it's been very fulfilling. At the same time, like just knowing that like people would come up and say thank you so much for doing this. If it wasn't for this, I probably wouldn't have gotten anything to eat today. But we're glad you're here.
I appreciate your vulnerability with opening up about your experiences and how, your work, it has two sides of a coin. Like, it can be challenging, it can be beneficial as well. I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on students being engaged within the community and being involved in a time like this. What are your thoughts?
So I've realized that a lot of people are speaking about community, yet they're not actively being a part of it, which is a big problem for me. Um, and it really frustrates me when people like to speak on things that they don't know about. Um, and and so that's something that we're trying to combat. Community is huge. It can mean a lot of things, and it has a lot of parts to it. It doesn't mean that you physically have to be out in the streets. I know in our model, find for everything about whether they're at home or if they're willing to come outside. And there's different parts to it. But yeah, we can use, I call it like croutons. Like, we use all the crumbs that we can get and turn them into croutons, like lemons into lemonade. But um, yeah, so we've utilized people's skills in different ways, whether they're artistic or they like to write, they want to be hands on. Uh, we can find a spot for all of it, but it sucks that a lot of people are ignorant or are performative. I've learned that ignorance is not bliss, it's misery. It causes a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and it leads to situations that we're in today. So, yeah, that's one thing I can say for all people is to not ignore whatever you hear in the news or whatever is happening, but instead educate, have conversations. Um, they're important.
For me, I believe the question was how can students be involved? Was that the question?
Yes, just speaking on the importance of community engagement and being involved during a time like this.
Oh, okay, the importance of community engagement. So for me, community engagement is very important, especially during these times. And so what we've seen is that parents are becoming teachers, and education is kind of falling on a back burner to health, rightfully so. And we are noticing that families are struggling and they don't have the resources that they need to adequately be able to provide a decent education for their kids. And so we are always trying to at least talk to parents, talk to schools, and figure out like where can we fit in, where can we help, what can we do to provide resources that will help families in their homes, because it's been a struggle. So I have twin boys who are in first grade, and when March came and I had to be home with them, work full time, and become their teacher, I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I had resources. I had books. I had manipulatives. I had arts and crafts activities. I had things for them to do, but I still felt overwhelmed. And so for me, we actually developed a reading resource kit based on what like the needs are to provide some basic reading structure in the home that's fun and engaging. And so we are learning a lot from the community. And so community engagement is important to us, because it allows us to pivot when we need to pivot and to know the right way to pivot. It also allows us to stay energized about the work that we're doing. And so over this past year and a half, we're running a business. If we were not actually physically going out and doing community events, we would not have the same joy about our business because it's an e-commerce business. And so when we are out and meeting with families and talking to them, and they are just blown away by the service that we're providing, and they didn't know that this was possible, it really like validates that what we're doing is right. Families need it, communities need it. And so it's really important to stay connected to the community in any work that you're doing, especially when you're running a social business or a nonprofit, as you all are doing. The community is what needs to inform your decisions and how you're going to go about things. And so we have that is the like cornerstone of our business. We really try to stay true to what communities need, what families need, what they want to read. And so being engaged is part and parcel in how we stay true to who we are.
I think students here can be involved first and foremost by informing themselves on what's happening, and not just like in a generic like national scale, but to know what is actually happening right here in your community. Like, this is where you live. You should want to know what is happening here. Um, and that way you can be a lot more helpful in like what is happening here. So my biggest thing, Zakaria kind of mentioned, is the performative aspect of things. That's what kind of bothered me the most out of people like sharing things on social media. It's like, okay, yeah, you're sharing this one thing that happened, you know, on a national scale, but are you keeping up with what is happening right here? And then another thing, kind of going off of that, is that like keeping in mind that it is not solely the responsibility of people of color, of indigenous people, of Black people to inform you on these things. You should want to seek these things out yourself, and do something about it yourself. I've experienced that so many times in a classroom setting where I actually major in international relations, and I've noticed that the aspects that we talk about are very whitewashed, very Eurocentric, very Americanized, and other aspects don't get brought in unless people who look like me bring it up. So that's another thing. And last, like, if you want to get involved, there are so many different things that you can do. Like, you know, I started this whole food thing, and then there were people who were having bake sales so they could raise the funds to donate to us. There was one little girl who like handmade these little clay earrings and had her mom hold a raffle for them. And I think her mom ended up sending like $200, and the raffle was like $5 each. And I was like, wow, that is a lot of people. That is one way that you can be involved. It doesn't always have to be taking to the streets and holding a sign and, you know, chanting. It can be just little things like that where you show love for your community. Because, like I said, you live here and this is your community, and you should care about it in whatever way you can.
Leads into our last questions. I'm going to make this a two-part question because I think we can answer this together. But what advice would you have for current students when it comes to being a better ally? And how can students or any others, how can people show up for your causes and your work?
So pretty much familiarize yourself with your community, with the nonprofits, the groups, the causes, the politicians, the people in your community that are doing the work, and then kind of get to know yourself as well, to know what you can do, what you can't do, what you like and what you dislike, because even though so, like groups or politicians are doing good work or have good things in place, there's also some not good things happening behind the scenes, which I've come to realize. Not everything is glitter and gold, and so um, definitely do some education. It's important. The next big thing that is free, does not really take much time, is to just spread the word. to get more allies on board, to tell your friends, tell your family, um, students, if you're in any clubs um, within your classroom, just like name drop the people, the organizations um, that you support, that you love, um, that you feel should get uh, their name spread around. I know for the Supply Hive, we have a Patreon, which is a monthly subscriber platform. So that's how we've been telling our supporters to support us. If they can donate $3 a month, then that helps us, even in the littlest way, to buy some food supplies, to buy some housekeeping equipment, or put on events. It's as easy as missing a free, like a meal, one of your fast meals each month, and instead putting it towards a cause. And also, if you have time, just donate that time to do some labor. I know within the Supply Hive, we have a community garden that is ran by the community, not just us. We have a committee of people who come out every day to make sure it's watered or weeded, trash is picked up, um, and that's our starting steps into something much bigger that we want to do in Des Moines. And so yeah, stay consistent, stay loyal to whoever you put your time into, because then bigger things happen. It's not really about, oh, I see a question. Is there a way to join this? Yes, through the link in our bio on our Twitter, um, or our Instagram or our website, you can find it at thesupplyhivedsm.org. Um, but what was I saying? Oh, staying loyal to a organization. It sometimes it can help when there are more organizations, but there are plenty of organizations doing work that others are doing. So when they can grow and become larger entities, I know the Supply Hive, we like to play with like bee puns for a lot of things. I think it's kind of punny or fun, but we call our all of our worker bees, our volunteers, our worker bees, and we're all in a colony, and we want to grow our colony, our hive of people. Um, but without like, I do think it's true that like when we can get more people supporting us but on an equal playing field, everybody has a role. There's not really much hierarchy to it, but it does help us grow, um, and help us help more people. It's not about ourselves, it's about the community at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Any other advice?
Yes. So I think that the position that allies play, particularly for me, is a strong one. And so to answer this question, to piggyback off of what was already said, mention the causes that you support in intentional ways and recognize the privilege that you have. So, for instance, if you are involved in an organization and you have some type of connection with that, you have some type of impact on a key part of a cause that you support, find ways to connect that cause with the work that your organization is doing, because you're not always going to be able to contribute your time or your finances, but those connections can go a long way. The next thing would be to, if you have the means, to contribute your time. That could be helpful. So, for instance, in my business, we are at a position where we need content. We are remote and we're trying to find ways to reach young kids, how to put on different activities virtually. And so it could be something as simple as reading a book and recording yourself, and we posting it as a story time for kids on our website. That time will go a long way for us. And then the next thing, if you have the means, contribute funds where possible. And so for the Brown Book Box, we're a subscription service, but we also, since COVID has started, we've slowly started to put our books online individually. So we're kind of turning into an online bookstore as well. It's not our wheelhouse, but that is fine. And provide gifts, or if you can't, if you have a grandparent that has great grandkids, tell them about what we do, and show them how to sign up for a subscription for their great grandkids. But really just being that connector piece in the positions that you have, in the and allowing the causes that you support to actually come to the table and to contribute, and be able to participate in the economy that's happening, so that they can then, one, continue the work that they're doing in their cause, but two, also support themselves in a way that is very hard to do if you are active in your community, working full time, you're in school, you have a family. Like, it's very hard to juggle all of those hats. And if you ask any entrepreneur or person that is starting a social endeavor, if they could do their thing full time, they would do their thing full time. So support in any way that you can to help make that a reality for them, and providing resources that you have. So I actually work in the nonprofit field in Des Moines. That's where I got my start, and so I know that there are tons of resources. There are tons of businesses, big businesses that do this. They will donate time to help you all really set those foundations for your organization, and bring to the table the pieces that you do not know, the pieces that you haven't yet been able to experience, and help you figure that out so that you do nothing but grow and build on the skills that you have, and your organization just becomes better. But yeah, I think that allies can just be intentional about the way in which you are connecting your cause to different entities, and being strategic about that so that they are able to benefit in some way that helps support the sustainability of their life and the progression of their cause.
For that, food firefighter.
Yeah, I think for being a better ally, like I mentioned previously, of course, educate yourself. We have so many resources, not just in the Des Moines area, but on Drake's campus itself. There are so many multicultural student organizations that are meant to be safe spaces for us, but they aren't exclusively for like those people. Like, I currently serve on the board for La Fuerza Latina, LFL, where we try to make it clear that even though this is a safe space for Latinx students, it is also a place where our allies can come and support us. That is true for any of the organizations that are part of the Unity Roundtable. So if you want to be involved in any way, you not only can go to these events and share space with people, but actually like get to know people like individually. I know at Drake I feel like there's a huge separation where people don't really want to like get close to each other because they feel like they're very different. I know I've felt that way several times. Like I've seen it a lot where I'm pretty sure that a lot of these conversations wouldn't be happening if it weren't for people like us speaking up about it, and making it clear that this is very important. So that's the first one. Get involved on campus, and then just learn more about Des Moines. Like, there are so many organizations available, like not just what we're doing here, but there are organizations that have been here for such a long time and they do all types of different work. There are very niche areas. And if you can't give your time, if you can't give any monetary funds to it, you can at least share the work that is going on. Because like I mentioned before, that was my biggest thing, where you want to show that you care for your community. So why wouldn't you want to participate in moments where we are showing our care for our community?
This transitions into the remaining portion of our webinar on allyship. I want to thank all the panelists for your vulnerability, your time, and your effort into sharing some information and the work that you do. We appreciate all the work that you're doing. I'm sure everyone will be clapping for you right now if we were in person, but know that, you know, love is coming your way. I saw that some social media stuff was going in the chat as well. Please feel free to include any links that you will want to direct some attention to in the chat box. I'm going to go ahead and turn it to Erin Lane, the Associate Provost for Equity and Inclusion, and Tony Tyler, the Associate Dean of Students.
Hi, everyone. My name's Erin Lane, and as Jocelyn said, I serve as the Associate Provost for Equity and Inclusion. Tony and I are just going to wrap us up with a few quick thoughts on how to be an ally in service work. And so I'm going to throw it over to him to introduce himself, and then we have some do's and don'ts that we want to talk about.
Thanks, Erin. This is Tony Tyler, Associate Dean of Students. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And thank you so much to Zakaria, to Denise, to Brittni. I've seen personally the work that all three of you are doing, and it's outstanding. And thank you for being agents of change for us. We appreciate it. So what we're going to hit really quickly, the panelists covered so much of how to be a good ally and sort of good things to do. So we're just going to very briefly, these are sort of some standard things we typically share. Remembering that to be an ally is to take on the struggle as your own. It's taking on a struggle for an identity group or a group that you don't identify with, and take it on as your own. It's to transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. So it has some privilege analysis as well as some action, right? The transferring of that. It's amplifying voices of the oppressed before your own. So it takes some self-awareness to think about your voice and to think about how amplified it is and how you can amplify other voices. If you feel pain, if you're critiqued or you observe some sort of act, right, whether it be a racist act or some sort of other oppressive act, acknowledge that you feel pain, and but at the same time acknowledge that the conversation isn't about you, right? Our feelings are real and that's legitimate, but at the same time, remembering not to center ourselves if we're an ally. To be an ally is to advocate even when you feel scared, and I might even elevate that a little bit and say advocate, like especially when you feel scared. Like those are maybe some of the most important times. The next one says if/when you mess up, own your mistakes and decenter yourself. The reason we say if and when you mess up is because the nature of this is that we probably are as allies, right? Like that was probably going to occur. So when it does, own it, decenter ourselves, and keep advocating, keep being an ally. Last one there is understanding that your education is up to you and no one else. We sort of jokingly say sometimes, it's a joke, but it's real at the same time, that Google is your best friend, that we can do a lot to educate ourselves, that we can do a lot of the reading and the understanding of other people's experiences, listening to stories and engaging folks, and that no one is obligated to educate us simply based on their identity.
So I'm going to jump forward and talk a little bit about the don'ts. And some of these are exactly the opposite of what Tony just talked about. So do not expect to be taught or shown. This is really critical. You know, it is difficult. I'll just share a personal reflection. So after the killing of George Floyd, you know, a lot of people reached out, and specifically because I'm a biracial woman, they said, you know, how are you doing? What are you feeling? Like, in a sense that they wanted me to tell them, and then what can I be doing to help? And on one hand, I really appreciated the reach out. I appreciated knowing that people were thinking about these issues deeply. But on the other hand, you know, that becomes really exhausting for people from marginalized communities to constantly be asked, what should I be doing as a member of a dominant group or a dominant identity in some regards? So really, as Tony talked about, Google is your friend. Reading is really important. seeking out resources that can help you figure out how you can use your allyship, your privilege, to extend the work. Do not operate for the gold medal in the oppression Olympics. You do not need to compare how your struggle is just as bad as another person's marginalized identity. So I love the you probably have heard this before, but I've heard a lot of people say justice or social justice is not a pie. So like if I get justice, that means it's less justice for you. And I think that's what happens when we start engaging in this oppression Olympics and thinking about which groups have had worst experiences. Everyone loses there, and it's not like there's only so much justice to go around. I think it's important to connect with others on their experiences. And so I think it's really valuable if you come from a marginalized identity to recognize similarities between experiences. That can be really empowering. But when you start the comparison, that's harmful. Do not behave as though you know best. This can be a challenge sometimes. Approaching work with a sense of humility, with a sense of wanting to learn, and being open is really important. Do not take credit for the labor of those who are marginalized and did the work before you moved into the picture. We hear about that a lot today. There's lots of scholars out there that are talking about anti-racist work, or different types of theories. And the reality is, even the most popular authors about social justice issues or initiatives did not come up with this idea on their own. So it's really important to recognize that the shoulders that we are all standing on, that anti-racist, fill in the oppressive category, that work has been going on for centuries. And then do not assume that every member of an underinvested community feels oppressed. One of the challenges of oppression is we start to come up with these kind of single stories about how people experience the world. So we assume that every person from a different racial background or gender identity background is experiencing the world in one single way. That's dangerous when we start to tell ourselves those single stories about different groups. So what I would encourage you is to think about the do's and don'ts of allyship and try to apply it in your service work or your community engagement. It's super important that you're being mindful of how you show up, how you support as you're going about that work. Sometimes we have all probably seen this, but there are people out there that do community engagement work and they end up creating more harm than good because they are not really embodying these do's and don'ts of being an ally, and that's something we really want to avoid. I want to pause there and see what questions you have, not only for me and Tony, but also for the panelists that joined us, and open it up for discussion. You can either use the chat feature to ask a question or make a comment, or you can use your microphone. Yeah, absolutely. We'll share the PowerPoint out with anyone who RSVP'd for this session. There was a couple of other slides that we didn't get to, so I think that will be helpful for you to look through the rest of those slides.
There's a great question there from Neva. What are the best ways to get involved in some of the Unity Roundtable organizations as a white person? Great question on how to get involved. What I would suggest, and I will drop the link here in the chat to the contacts for each of the multicultural organizations, and I would suggest you throw them an email, or if you're friends on social media, ask them there, and find out when events are going on. Look at their social media, find out when events are going on, find out when meetings are. And I would say jump in, like get involved. That's the best way to do it. Just do it, right? Sometimes we overthink it a little bit. We're like, oh, what's this going to be? How's it going to go? I loved that for years, the both official and unofficial motto of the Coalition of Black Students was, "You don't have to be us to befriend us." And I think that is a common motto across all the multicultural organizations, whether it's Coalition of Black Students, La Fuerza Latina, International Student Association, Rainbow Union, DAC, Disability Action and Awareness Community. I think all of the organizations are like, hey, come jump in on events and come to meetings. I think they love it. And so I'll drop the link here in the chat. You can see the basic info, like contact info, social media, and just when there's an event or there's a meeting, just show up, and you'll, I think, find lots of ways to be involved. That's a really good question. Thank you, Neva.
Any other comments or questions for our panelists, for our community engaged learning staff, for me or Tony?
I just want to say that this was great. I've been gone for 3 or 4 years, and just hearing CBS and La Fuerza Latina and Unity Roundtables, it's kind of bringing back some nostalgia.
We miss you, Brittni. We miss you.
I think there's a question in the chat. How can we get more involved with the Office of CEO?
Sure. So to get more involved with the Office of Community Engaged Learning here at Drake, there's lots of different ways. It kind of depends on what you're interested in. If you are looking to get involved with an organization or a volunteer opportunity, we can certainly set up kind of a one-on-one advising appointment to talk about that. Check out www.drake.edu/volunteer. We are receiving ongoing opportunities from some of our community partners, even though they might look a little bit different right now during the time of COVID. There's still lots of different ways that maybe in small groups and social distancing, doing in-person things, or some things that you can do virtually or remotely. So take a look at our website, drake.edu/CEL. And look at the student opportunities page. There's things you can do right here on campus too. We have a learning garden, the Sprout Learning Garden. We do food recovery. We have little pantries that student organizations or students can adopt. So yeah, feel free to check out those resources there and let us know if you want to set up something more one-on-one.
I see the question about readings and self-education. There is another group here in Des Moines that just recently started. They're going to be like a revolutionary text book lending group. I'll see if I can find a link to their work right now, but really what they're trying to do is create like a network of texts that can be shared and borrowed, so that they are accessible to the community, and isn't something that you have to buy or anything. You just borrow it, return it, just like a library.
I shared reading Toni Morrison or James Baldwin or other like revolutionary artists, novelists, because when you read, there's a level of empathy that you gain. There's a level of understanding that you gain, and so it does a little bit more to your brain when you are actually reading the stories of lives of people, or of characters that are going through what people of color are going through every single day, or marginalized, or people from marginalized communities are going through every day, and it allows you to really try kind of put yourself in their shoes. And so in addition to reading about strategies that you can take to impact social change, I think it's also important that you take some time out to read some of the nonfiction or fiction stories that are out there, so that you can really like immerse yourself into what it's like, what it may feel like, because for me, that's what reading does.
Absolutely, that's great advice. Thank you. Tony, anything you want to say before you have to head out? Okay. Thank you again to our panelists and everyone who participated in the chat and just for being here today. I think everybody got some ideas, so this is wonderful. Don't let it stop here, please. Be in touch, work together on things, and start with yourself. We are at 1:01, so we're going to go ahead and close us out for the day. We'll send out the PowerPoint and some follow-up information. But again, thank you everybody and have a great rest of your day.